Hello everybody, welcome to number 27. I'm Jack and today I'm here with this fantastic 944 Turbo. Now I always felt a little bit sorry for the transaxle Porsches because it always felt like the mother company never fully bought into the concept. Even though they sold very well, when they replaced them with the Boxster Cayman and so on, they went for a different layout. And in the case of this very car, the 944 Turbo, they even artificially made it slower. To find out how and why they did that, let's take it for a drive. The 944 in terms of chassis was derived from the 924. It wasn't really that different. There were body differences, a few suspension differences, the engines of course. But to me it always looked a little bit more, it didn't have the delicacy of the 924, so to me it was more successful as an exercise for people who wanted the true feel of a Porsche. There were various evolutions. The 944 was always praised for its very neutral handling, but it's when the turbo came into play that to me it started to knock on the door of supercars really, because 0 to 60 for the second stage turbo, which was the Turbo S, 250 horsepower, was 5.6 seconds. Top speed 162 miles an hour, so that is really quite serious performance. So the original turbos came with 220 horsepower, and the very first ones were massively in demand because they used race car parts. Within a couple of years, the sort of Porsche accountants got hold of that and they sort of changed it. The Turbo S had a bigger KKK turbocharger, so it put out an extra 30 horsepower. This car isn't a Turbo S, but in spec, it's pretty much the same. The later turbos got the Turbo S engine, and if like this one, they were spec'd with the M030, I think it is, suspension package. And then there were a few detailed interior differences and so on, but in terms of performance and everything else, this is pretty much the same as a Turbo S. The facelift cars like this one also got an updated interior, and although there are some people who love the sort of early square dash cars, I do think that this is a definite improvement in terms of looks. And like most Porsches, in terms of ergonomics, it is pretty much spot on. Driving position is excellent, you've got good reach, legs, steering wheel, everything works pretty well. Earlier on, I mentioned that Porsche intentionally hobbled this car. Why is that and how did they do it? The clue is in those performance stats that I told you about a little while ago. So 0 to 60, 5.6 seconds, top speed 162 miles an hour. The 930 Turbo, the 911 Turbo that was being sold at the time, had more power, but top speed was only 164 miles an hour. 0 to 60, 5.3 seconds. Porsche didn't feel like they could have the junior car outperform the venerable 911. So did they really intentionally make this car slower? And yes, they did. It's quite well known within the 944 community, although it was never an official policy or communicated, that they artificially kept the power down on the turbo's engine by a strange use of the wastegate. So on the 930, for example, the wastegate goes to 12 psi, then it opens, and obviously it tapers off the boost once it does that. The 944's wastegate is supposed to do the same thing. So once it gets to 12 psi, it's supposed to open. In reality, what they found was with the 944, that wastegate started bleeding pressure from when it hit 4 psi, therefore artificially limiting performance. This car has had that seen to. So the wastegate has been changed, or the wastegate is the same. The actuator for the wastegate has been changed. And in this particular car, it's been set up so it actually puts out even more PSI. I can't remember exactly what the figure was that I was told about, but it has been dynoed and it puts out 311 horsepower. Even without that extra boost though, with a normal wastegate at 12 psi, even in terms of outright just performance, this would have been faster than the 911. Even as they were at 250 horsepower on track, they still outperformed that car. First gear, massive amount of wheel spin. Luckily, this does have a limited slip diff, so unlike the Virage that I drove yesterday, which I loved but was frankly terrifying, this at least feels a little bit predictable when it does start to spin up. Now, the one thing about these cars that I would say, 968s as well, I was expecting a huge amount from them, and second gear, loads of wheel spin. It is a very cold day. The road is very wet, but I don't really want to get this sideways. But the one thing that I always thought about these, the 944s and the 968s, is that I was expecting a lot from them, and when I first started driving them, when I drove my first ones, I felt a little bit let down. They do everything properly, but I couldn't see what all the fuss was about, and that is because, in my experience, they only really seem to come alive when they're at the limit. When they are at the limit, they are absolutely incredible. They are so well balanced. But in every day-to-day driving, they just don't feel that amazing. It does feel like a fast car. 311 horsepower, weighs about 1,350 kilos, I think, which is about the same as the 930 Turbo of that era. The steering, it's not brimming in feel at normal speeds. That's the weird thing. You have to push it to get it to come alive, pretty much like the rest of the car. Weight distribution on this car is 50-50, so gearbox at the back, transaxle, that considered, the gearbox is actually pretty good. It's quite a long throw. It's a little bit bulky at times, but it's quite a nice gear change to use, especially with that lovely Porsche gear stick, which is just perfect. So I really want to get a proper feel for the performance on this 944, so I'm going to go and try and find a main road which hopefully will have a little bit more grip than this, and I can get a bit more of a feel for what it can do. It's a quick car for sure, and you can really feel that torque coming in. Now, sort of wakes up around 3,000, but where the kick really comes around 4. First and second gear, loads of wheel spin. Third gear seemed to just about keep it in. It's got a really addictive kick around 4,000. It will rev and it's quite smooth, but I don't think there's much point changing above sort of about 5.5, because you want to keep it into that stonking torque. The suspension actually feels quite firm. Oh. Third gear there, and again over the bumps, just wheel spinning a little bit. So I think you have to feel a little bit sorry for 944s really, because for a long time they weren't considered proper Porsches. Some people still turn their noses up at them. I love them. I love 944s. I think they look awesome, and I prefer them over 968s, and I prefer this over a 968 Club Sport. both of which I've driven, because I think as standard, these engines, these fours, there's nothing wrong with them, but they're not remarkable engines either. They don't sound particularly good. There's nothing that distinguishes them. So it's one of those engines that actually benefits from being turbocharged. Not only do you get the extra boost, but it gives the engine a little bit of character. Yes, it's the turbocharged old style character of having, you know, the sort of the big boost, the wave of torque coming in when it really fires up. But that still makes it a little bit more interesting to me, at least in normal driving conditions. I reckon a 968 Club Sport, obviously at the limit, will be an easier car to handle than this. But this is just a fab car all the same. And I think a little bit more interesting day to day. I also way prefer the way that these look. I think it's a much more balanced design. They did a good job at the time with the 968 to try and keep it looking modern, but this is just a much better design in my eyes. So I think it's a little bit of a shame in the end that Porsche didn't feel that they could unleash the full potential of the transaxle cars. But at the same time, I can understand why. And the 911s, although perhaps dynamically they were inferior, they do have a character and a feel that really distinguishes them from other cars, and the look as well. So I could kind of understand why Porsche in the end were forced to keep that going, and why they couldn't let a car which was cheaper outperform it. All the same, I really do love these. Thank you all so much for watching, and I really look forward to seeing you for the next video.